when 12-year-old Karissa Boudreau suddenly vanished on January 28, 2008, from a grocery store parking lot after an argument with her mother, Penny Boudreau, the town of Bridgewater, Nova Scotia feared the worst, that a stranger was stalking the children of their tiny community. For 13 days, the story of the missing 12-year-old made national news. Posters of Karissa were handed out across the country, and a Facebook group set up to bring attention to her case grew to over 10,000 people. But quietly behind the scenes, there were rumors and speculation. The town seemed divided about Penny Boudreau's possible involvement. Police suspected that Karissa's mother knew more than what she was telling them. The details surrounding her daughter's death didn't make any sense. When she disappeared, Karissa wasn't dressed for winter weather and was last seen wearing only a hoodie, jeans, and pink Crocs on her feet. The temperature was below freezing, and there was also a snowstorm moving into the area on the day she was last seen. Sadly, after almost a 2-week search, Karissa would be found brutally murdered. The truth was, there wasn't a stranger hunting the children of Bridgewater, but one of their own was responsible, and the motive for the killing was much darker than anyone could have ever imagined. And when Penny Boudreau was eventually arrested months later for the murder of her only daughter, the country struggled to understand why she would do this. This is the story of the murder of Karissa Boudreau. Bridgewater, Nova Scotia is a town of about 8,000 people, situated around 100 kilometers southeast of Halifax. It sits on the Le Havre River and is known for its hiking trails and the South Shore Exhibition, which attracts about 50,000 people to the area each summer. Like many small towns, Bridgewater is considered a safe place to live. Previous to Karissa Boudreau's murder, the last known homicide occurred back in 1993. In 2008, 12-year-old Karissa Boudreau lived in an apartment with her mother Penny and her mother's boyfriend Vernon. She loved animals and wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up. Karissa's grandmother, Suzanne Greer, said that her granddaughter loved reading, talking to friends online, and playing with Barbies. She had recently moved back to Bridgewater, and the kids and teachers from Bridgewater Elementary School, where she attended, described Karissa as friendly and happy. Her father, Paul Boudreau, described Karissa as normal with a rebellious streak. Karissa's parents separated when she was young, and she lived mainly with her mom in Bridgewater, but would visit her dad in nearby Shelburne often. But as Karissa grew older, she and Penny would fight often, although Penny would later say that their disagreements were never serious. However, the fights between mother and daughter would be too much for Karissa, and in 2007, she would move in and live with her father for about half a year. But in the fall of 2007, Karissa told her father that she missed her mom, and decided to move back to Bridgewater. Knowing what we know now, this would be a tragic mistake. On the afternoon of January 28, 2008, Penny Boudreau would tell police that she took her daughter for a drive to have a talk with her. But an argument between mother and daughter broke out in the parking lot of the Sobeys grocery store. Penny would get out of the car to go into the store, while Karissa stayed in the vehicle. This would be confirmed by CCTV footage inside of Sobeys. However, there were no cameras outside of the store to capture Karissa's last moments. Penny shopped inside of the grocery store for about 10 minutes, and when she returned to the car, Karissa was gone. If Penny's version of events were to be believed, her daughter got out of the car and was seen by no one. Penny first contacted her ex-husband and family members, who organized their own search around town. Finally, 3 hours after Karissa disappeared, police were contacted, and Penny told them that she had already searched the areas where Karissa liked to hang out and drove the streets of Bridgewater searching for her daughter.
That argument, whatever it was certainly nowhere near as important as what we're here talking about now. Do you want to put that in perspective?
It wasn't like a big argument per se. I took her for a drive that day just to try to have a heart-to-heart with her in a place, like in a car she can't get away and slam her door, which she usually does to me. I just wanted to try to reach out to her as a mom and set some things straight as far as typical teenage things or whatever, and she didn't like what I had to say. I mean, most kids don't. And
This was the first red flag that something was not right about Penny's story. The weather was also horrible as a snowstorm was moving into the region, and Penny told police that Karissa was only wearing a black vest over a black hoodie, jeans, pink Crocs, and only had $2 in her pocket. She also wasn't carrying a purse or a cell phone. The police immediately organized aerial searches, stretching out 50 kilometers along the highway leading into Bridgewater. Then on February 1st, a press conference was held at the Bridgewater police station, and Penny Boudreau made a tearful plea in an effort to reach out to her daughter, and she also asked the community for help to find her missing child.
I'm just here to reach out to my daughter. Karissa, I just want to tell you that you have lots of people who love you and want you home. Your Aunt April is here, your mom is here, your dad, Shane, Vernon, your Uncle Joey, your Aunt Chrissy, your friend Sarah's worried sick, everybody at school, your grandmothers, everybody. Please just reach out to someone. At least call us and let you know you're okay. We all love you. And if there's anybody out there that knows, has seen her or anything, please call. The other thing I want to say is I want to thank everyone in the community that's been a support, all the businesses we both work for and the community in general. It's been very comforting. Nothing can be done to make things better, but it's comforting to have support. The main thing is I just want somebody to come forward. If not Karissa herself, somebody, let me know. It's hard to not know where your kid is.
2 weeks after she disappeared, Paul Boudreau, Karissa's father, was coming to the realization that his daughter wasn't coming home. None of the police leads were going anywhere, and foul play was the only logical explanation. Police divers had also been brought in to search the river that ran behind the Sobeys grocery store. It was frozen over at the time of Karissa's disappearance, but had now started to unthaw. A ground search team was also organized to walk the riverbank area and highway, looking for footprints. The community rallied together. Child Find Nova Scotia also handed out thousands of posters of Karissa across the country, but at this point, there were still no solid leads. And then, 2 weeks after Karissa disappeared, police received a 911 call about possible human remains discovered near the river, just south of Bridgewater. A woman contacted police after her 9-year-old son had saw human toes sticking out of the snow along the riverbank. When police arrived on the scene, they noted that the face and body were covered with about 1 inch of snow and ice, but the toes of the remains were pointed upwards. Dr. Matt Bowes, who was the chief forensic pathologist for the province of Nova Scotia, examined the body at the scene, and it was his expert opinion that this was not the crime scene. It looked as if the body had been placed in the area shortly after death. There were no signs that the victim had struggled to climb uphill from the river, and there were swollen red ligature marks on her neck, indicating that she had been strangled. But when pressed by the media, police would not confirm if it was Karissa. They would only say that her family had been contacted and there was no positive ID. An autopsy needed to be conducted first, but police did confirm that members of the Boudreau family were not asked to view the remains, as the body had been exposed to the elements for a while. But the people of Bridgewater already concluded that the body was Karissa's and wanted closure. The grief-stricken town was in mourning, and that evening a prayer vigil was held in the Sobeys parking lot where Karissa was last seen. There, community members lit candles and said prayers. And there was also a makeshift memorial constructed in the spot where Karissa's body was discovered. A wall of teddy bears, stuffed animals, flowers, and letters that grew in size daily. On Thursday, February 14th, using dental records, police confirmed what everyone already suspected, that the remains belonged to Karissa Boudreau, and this was no accident. She had been a victim of homicide, although police wouldn't reveal how she died at the time because they were treating her death as an open criminal investigation. They also wouldn't say if Karissa died on the night she disappeared or in the area where her body was found. Sergeant John Collier of the Bridgewater Police would only confirm that where Karissa's body was discovered was within walking distance of her home, although her body was discovered on the opposite side of the river from the grocery store where Karissa was last spotted. And since the river at the time was frozen over, and it wasn't unusual for locals to cross the ice as a shortcut, some people theorized that she might have tried to cross over, as she wasn't that far from home. It would be later revealed that the cause of death was listed as asphyxiation. But the area where her body was discovered looked strange. Police and the medical examiner thought the body looked staged. The position of Karissa's clothing raised more questions than answers. The medical examiner told police that someone was trying to give the impression a sexual assault had occurred, except Karissa had no other injuries, so it was unlikely that this was true. At this point, the police acknowledged that the town was on edge and concerned about their safety, but wouldn't say if they believed the murder was an isolated incident or not. Needless to say, the town was nervous given the possibility of a child killer on the loose in a town of only 8,000 people. Sergeant Collier must have sensed the anxiety within the community, because a few days later, he announced that the murder was being investigated as an isolated event. Although they still didn't have any official suspects, which only frustrated the town further. But then, 2 days after that, police made an announcement that 2 suspects were arrested who were known to Karissa. However, these suspects couldn't be held for more than 24 hours because police didn't have enough evidence to charge them. Police would tell reporters that they were confident that the investigation was moving in the right direction and asked the community for patience. They also wouldn't publicly identify the 2 suspects, only saying that these 2 individuals were brought in for questioning and then released. But the media was starting to put 2 and 2 together, and began staking out the apartment of Penny Boudreau and Vernon McCumber. And when reporters peppered Vernon with questions as they approached him at the front door, he would only mutter no comment. Behind the scenes, a search warrant had been quietly executed at the apartment where Karissa lived with her mother and Vernon. From almost the moment Karissa disappeared, police felt that something was off. But police really began to suspect Penny's involvement after a few phone calls came in from the neighbors who lived below the couple. On February 12th, 2 weeks after Karissa was murdered, Vernon and Penny were fighting loudly, and the neighbors overheard a few things that sounded suspicious. Vernon was throwing things around the apartment and told Penny he was leaving her. He was also overheard saying over and over again, quote, "How could you do this? I don't understand. You got me involved." And he also said he wasn't going to help her get out of this mess. This was around the time that police came up with a plan to get Penny to confess to the murder. The RCMP set up a Mr. Big Sting operation, which is where undercover police officers pose as members of an organized crime group. It's considered a controversial but often successful police practice. Mr. Big Stings are used to gain a suspect's trust, and once they do, the undercover officer attempts to convince the suspect they could possibly make their problem go away if they confess to the murder and how they did it. During this time, police still weren't so sure about Vernon, so an undercover officer was set up to meet with him too. He stressed to the undercover officer that he had nothing to do with the murder of Karissa Boudreau and that he suspected that Penny was the real killer. He said he was only still living with her to keep her close, and so she wouldn't implicate him in the murder.
So how did it come undone then? How did her story unravel, and how did it end up to be where we are now?
I just felt, I just felt something was not right though.
You felt something in your gut?
Yeah, in your stomach. You just felt deep down that there was something wrong, and it wasn't just right. And I think other people felt that too. They could feel something. It just wasn't like a normal grieving person should be acting like, especially losing their daughter, right?
And at that point, what did you do?
I mean, I was having mixed feelings about it myself. You wanted to be there for somebody, but yet you didn't want to be around them, because feeling if they done something like that.
But did you call police?
Well, I've talked, I cooperated with the police from the very beginning.
But did you tell the police, I have a feeling, this is just my sense?
Well, I did tell them that. I did actually tell them that in the interview. I even went in and said, I feel something's just not right, and I told them how I felt. I mean, I'm going to tell the truth, And they said, and I did. Told them whatever I could to help them. It's always forward. Always tried to help them until they started looking at me and accusing me, and then I can't cooperate then. I mean, I was scared to death for myself,
And you offered to take a lie detector test?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I offered. They asked me if I'd take one, and I said sure. And I called them up a couple of days later because they were going to arrange it, and all of a sudden they changed their mind. They didn't want me to take a lie detector test.
So at what point did you know that she'd murdered Karissa? Like, when was that very clear?
I actually, it wasn't clear until I heard her confession. I mean, I knew in my heart there was some things that, I didn't, that made me question, but I gave her the benefit of the doubt.
During one meeting with an undercover officer, Penny made a strange remark, saying that she wished the police exhibit vault would burn down or blow up. She wasn't stupid. She knew the potential value of DNA evidence. Finally, after 4 months of meetings, Penny eventually admitted to undercover officers that she murdered her daughter, even reenacting how she killed her. The position of Karissa's body and the state in which she was discovered was not initially released to the media. This was considered holdback evidence, information that was only known to the killer. This included how her clothing was arranged on her body and items of clothing that was missing from the scene. She also took one of the undercover officers to the scene of the murder and the location where she dumped the body.
34-year-old Penny Patricia Boudreau was arrested on Friday, June 13th in Halifax. She will answer to the charge of first-degree murder on Monday, June 16th at Bridgewater Provincial Court.
34-year-old Penny Patricia Boudreau will be appearing in Bridgewater Court Monday at 9:30 to face charges.
2 days later, Penny Boudreau would be arrested for Karissa's murder, although when she was first interviewed by RCMP, she admitted to nothing. It was only after she was shown a short portion of the video and audio of her meeting with undercover officers that she confessed to everything. Police would only tell the media that they didn't expect any further charges in the case. Beyond that, they wouldn't reveal further details other than the evidence only pointed to one person responsible for the murder. Emotions in Bridgewater were obviously running high. Even extra security had to be set up at the provincial courthouse because the case was so high profile. After being formally charged, Penny was led from the courthouse to a sheriff's car, with a crowd of about 150 waiting to greet her for her perp walk. Some yelling, "Murderer" and "Killer." Several in the crowd began to boo. Although the jeers and the name-calling were understandable, this was an ending that nobody wanted or expected. And after all the time and volunteer hours invested trying to find Karissa, finding an impartial jury in Bridgewater would be almost impossible. This case would never see a jury, though. Penny would even waive her right to a preliminary hearing. On January of 2009, Penny Boudreau would plead guilty to second-degree murder. She was originally charged with first-degree murder, but an agreement was made with the Crown in order to avoid a lengthy trial.
This is a case where to give the family closure, to give the community closure, to prevent and spare the family the anguish of a trial. A life sentence for second-degree murder is the same as a life sentence for first-degree murder. The question is when the person may first apply for parole, whether it's at anywhere from 10 to 25 years or 25 years. And in this case, we had arrived with a joint submission at a parole ineligibility period that was very high, 20 years, and felt that it was a fit and appropriate resolution, taking into account the life sentence, regardless of whether it was first degree or second.
And before she was sentenced, the court would finally learn why she did what she did. Penny admitted to an undercover police officer that she killed her daughter because she didn't want to lose her boyfriend. Her exact words were, she would do anything for Vernon, and that the thought of losing him was worse than the thought of losing her daughter. I guess it never occurred to her that sending Karissa back to live with her father was an option.
She was alive and well when she was at the parking lot at Sobeys, and when Miss Boudreau made the call to Mr. McCumber and reported her missing. She was still in the car, still alive, and it was from there at the Sobeys that she took her to the Williams Head Road and strangled her. Our understanding from what Miss Boudreau described, she was slumped in the passenger seat in the well area, likely not visible to the public. And at that point, she drove her up to Tim Hortons, took the twine, put it in a Tim Hortons cup, and put it into a Tim Hortons garbage can, where obviously with the many Tim Hortons cups would never be discovered. The understanding that we have for motive appeared to be twofold from the statements she gave to the undercover operator. The first and primary motivating factor appeared to be that she felt that Karissa's presence was a danger to the relationship continued between her and Vernon, and that she had to kill her to take care of that problem. And secondly, there was discussion by her about this 12-year-old talking badly about her to friends and to people in the community, and she didn't want that to happen, particularly at this stage. And that those two appear to be the factors which ended up motivating her to kill her daughter.
In her statement that she gave to police after she was arrested, Penny said that she planned to kill Karissa on January 27th. That evening, Penny had a fight with Vernon, who apparently told her that their 2-bedroom apartment was cramped with Karissa living there, and Penny had to make a choice between her daughter or him. Around 3 p.m., she took Karissa for a drive, and both of them were angry at the time. After driving to the grocery store, Penny called Vernon and told him Karissa was missing. She walked back out to the car, put the groceries in the trunk, and grabbed a piece of twine, putting it in her pocket. By now, she said, Karissa wanted out of the car. So Penny waited until it got dark and drove the car to an isolated road and told Karissa that if she wanted out of the car, to get out. When Karissa got out of the vehicle, so did Penny. By now it was snowing heavily, so when she went to grab Karissa, Penny accidentally slipped and tackled Karissa to the ground. Penny pinned Karissa's hands down with her knees, so she was unable to fight back. She would then wrap the twine she had hidden around her hands, and then around Karissa's neck, pulling in a crisscross motion with all her strength. The young girl died, begging for her life. Karissa's last words to her mother were, "Mommy, don't." During all this, Penny could feel Karissa trying to move her hands as they were digging into the ground. When she could no longer feel her daughter breathing, Penny placed the twine into an empty Tim Hortons coffee cup and dragged her daughter's body back to the car. As she did this, Karissa's jeans and underwear were pulled down. Penny decided to leave Karissa's clothing in this position, as it might suggest to investigators that a sexual assault had occurred. She then drove to the edge of the La Have River, where she discarded Karissa's remains. Penny rolled Karissa's body over the edge of the bank, where her body landed among the trees, but didn't land in the river. She then discarded some pieces of clothing and one of Karissa's pink sandals into a garbage can at a local swimming pool. These items would be recovered by police a few days later, when someone who was searching the trash can for recyclables found the pink crock and contacted police. Knowing the snow from the pending snowstorm would hide the body, Boudreau then drove home around 7:30 p.m. and told Vernon and the police that Karissa had run away, even though Karissa had no history of running away from home. A missing persons report was filed, and Penny began her tearful media plea for her daughter's safe return. As the statement was read into evidence in the courtroom, Penny bobbed up and down in her seat and wiped away her tears, but had no other reaction. When asked by the court if she had anything to say, she simply stood up, said she was sorry, and sat back down. Outside of the courthouse, Paul Boudreau, Karissa's father, told reporters that he was sickened by Penny's motive for murder, that for a parent to make that decision, he couldn't comprehend it.
She had many options. There was many people around her that would have gladly, had I known this was going to happen, I would never ever let her go back. But I mean, what parent's going to try to, say, no, you can't go back and see your mother? Chris and I always had a special bond. I mean, and I feel bad because of how things folded out, because my brother loved her just as much and spent more time than I did with her. I mean, he basically, if I wasn't there, he was there by her side. So, I mean, he's kind of got left on the wayside, but I mean, he was just as much of a father to her as I was. Well, you know what's made me strong? Is spending time with the kids around me, around the community and that stuff. And I mean, them little kids, the children were devastated. I mean, how many children at that age have a best friend that's brutally murdered? You know, you hear your friend's name across the TV, every day, constantly, when it all first happened about your best friend or somebody you knew. Children do not go through that very often. And from my working with the children and that stuff and talking to them, that helped me through it.
As for Vernon McCumber, the man Penny murdered her daughter to be with, police never found any evidence that he was ever involved. He would later sit down for an interview with CTV and tell them he felt guilty about Karissa's death, saying that it was avoidable and should have never happened. He denied ever giving Boudreau an ultimatum about her daughter, saying that he only told her the constant fighting between Penny and Karissa couldn't continue. He wanted everyone to get counseling.
Do you remember the news conference? Because I remember your face at the news conference. You almost looked as though you were in disbelief or shock. I thought you had a very strange look on your face.
It was just, I just didn't know what to do. It was just such a horrible nightmare it was like a bad dream unfolding. And I just didn't know what to do, to be there for Penny and the rest of the family too, but you felt that the eyes were on you. And that's the way I felt, though, that they were looking at me like I've done something.
But why did you tell her to make that choice? You said, it's either Karissa or me.
No, actually, I didn't. Actually, I said, because they were fighting quite a bit. And I asked them, you have to do something about this. Is not a productive family when they're arguing and fighting. And I could come home and hear them screaming and hollering, right, as I was coming up the stairs. So I knew they and I was new in their family, so I thought, well, when we all sit down, we're going to see a counselor or something. That's what I wanted to, because to show a kid that, because she's going through a rough time where the divorce was, right? So, that's why I mentioned that. Something had to be done with their fighting, because it got so it was not constructive of the family, right? It was just all the time in the mornings, and, and I'd come home and hear them arguing, and so that's basically what it was about.
A second-degree murder conviction in Canada carries an automatic life sentence. Penny would be eligible to apply for parole after serving 20 years. Although she had no previous criminal history, the judge determined that the impact on the community, her capacity for manipulation, and the violation of her role of trust and responsibility were mitigating factors in determining parole ineligibility. Justice Margaret Stewart didn't hold back while sentencing Boudreau, telling her, quote, "You can never call yourself a mother. The words "mommy don't" are there to haunt you the rest of your life." In the past 16 years since being sentenced, Penny Boudreau is now considered a model prisoner and scored very low on her most recent psychological risk assessment to reoffend. And because of this, she continues to earn more privileges. In Canada, our parole system allows some offenders to serve some of their sentence outside of prison and in the community. I don't necessarily like or agree with this, but I'm not the one who makes the rules. In order to be granted day parole or full parole, inmates must show they are at a low risk to reoffend first, which brings me to Penny Boudreau. Since April of 2018, the Parole Board of Canada has been granting Penny Boudreau about 4 temporary escorted passes a year, with the exception of 2020 and 2021, when COVID-19 prevented her from attending these outings. She's been using these passes to attend church and to visit someone the Parole Board refers to as a spiritual mentor. Although she hasn't been able to participate in some of these temporary escorted passes because of supposed safety concerns. Every time Penny is approved for these absences, the mainstream media brings a lot of attention to this case, which is not necessarily the worst thing in the world. The more attention that is drawn to a case, the less likely the offender will ever be released. I say this, but in April of 2024, the Parole Board of Canada approved Penny for a buttload of temporary escorted absences, 23 to be exact, saying that they based their decision on her behavior while she was incarcerated, whether she was an undue risk to society, and if she had a structured plan for these absences. 18 of them were described as personal development escorted temporary absences of up to 4 hours each, to participate in church-related activities. 4 of these absences were to be spent with family for up to 7 hours each, and one of them was to visit a community-based residential facility for 2 hours, otherwise known as a halfway house. She still has another 4 years before she can apply for parole, and she already has 1 foot out the door. As for the community of Bridgewater, they continue to be haunted by Karissa's murder and opposed to Penny's release. Friends and family members to this day continue to submit victim impact statements to the parole board, expressing their grief and loss. Karissa's father is especially opposed to Penny's release, but he says he understands how the system works. Quote, "Ever since this happened, she's never faced any of us. I want her to look me in the eye and tell me that she's rehabilitated and she should be out. And if she can give me a good reason, then you know what? She's done her time. But I guarantee that's not going to happen." Thank you so much for watching and taking the time to hang out with me today. If you enjoyed learning about this case, please be sure to like and subscribe. If there's a case you would like me to cover in a future video, let me know in the comment section down below. To support my channel, you can go to Buy Me a Coffee if you would like to donate. Thanks again, and I will see you next time.